excitement. They said it was going to replace the web, and educators had this wonderful enthusiasm, but it was rarely backed by, you know, any oomph to it, any material to it. It was just all enthusiasm. And this doesn't mean everything met tears. There were some good projects done, and a lot of lessons learned. But around 2008, this inundation of users actually started making Second Life kind of start come apart at the seams. Many of you that go back to that era kind of remember how logins were a mess. You would log in, things wouldn't load. The technology was just really starting to scream and say, please stop, no more members. I just can't take it anymore. And this is around the time, as I offensively call it, EDU locusts moved on. And what I notice a lot in the educational circles is that there's a certain group of academicians who are always looking for the newest thing. And they usually go really quickly explore it, kind of come up with an opinion about it, write a paper about it, perhaps publish something, take it to a conference, and then next year they can't do that subject again, right? So, I mean, you can only write a paper about Twitter so many times. So they have to find the next it item. And in that regard, these educators came, tried to get a lot of efficiency out of Second Life with the least amount of effort. Some of the institutions threw a lot of money at it. Like, I had sister institutions that pay up to $25,000 to get a campus built, and I'm like, you don't need that. I would build that for you in 2 weeks. That shouldn't cost that much. But a lot of campuses were built, and they just kind of like left. They said, okay, well, we're done with this. We're not able to do anything with it. It doesn't do what we want it to do. It turns out it's not going to replace the web. Boo, unhappiness. And we were kind of in the middle of all of that going like, did we miss something? What happened? So the dark year of 2008 was followed by 2009, where we soul searched and said, well, everybody's kind of leaving. Shall we stay or shall we go? And that's when I said, and we said as a group, we need a real project. We need something that we are doing in Second Life that cannot be executed elsewhere, so that we can really demonstrate the worthiness of this platform. And when we started on this process, we realized you can't just put together one of those projects in a week or 2 weeks or a couple of weeks or just one day that most of the educators expected. It turns out building anything in Second Life is just like any other platform. You have to plan, you have to have a clear mission, you have to have objectives, and you have to have a clear plan how to accomplish those objectives and a way to measure it at the end. So you have to have that plan, and then you have to be in it for the long haul, because a lot of the things we tried in Second Life were, even despite our collective knowledge, we had to throw a lot of trial and error into it. Sometimes you build something, you script something, and it doesn't work right the first time, or it works great and then your students hate it. So we said we're going to have a plan, and our plan included building simulations. So we wanted to do a simulation that we could just honestly say this is a true simulation that Second Life can do for you, that if you tried to do anywhere else it would be very expensive, or you wouldn't have the skill set, or your audience wouldn't be able to reach it. So we had to demonstrate that viability. We were sure that by that time, because the technology was changing, the campus started looking old. That was the weird thing, is like, how can a virtual campus get old? But it does. And if you don't believe me, go to any of the older NMC rented out simulators. I'm not talking about the beautiful sims that New Media Consortium built. I'm talking about the empty sims that they loaned or rented out to other universities who lost interest. They're still out there. I think they're named Teaching and a number afterwards. You will see that those campuses really aged in no time, and if you go there, they'll look really quaint to your eyes. So we needed to renovate the campus. We said we also need to get our faculty on board, and how are we going to do this? We offered faculty workshops, but a lot of times faculty would say, well, I don't have 3 hours to come to a workshop. And I said, what do you mean you don't have 3 hours in one semester's worth of time to come and see a workshop about Second Life? And they didn't. Our faculty are really busy, and they too are looking for efficiency. So we kind of started this thing where we allowed them to bring in a class. So we educate their undergrad class along with them in the course of 2 hours on how to use Second Life, where to go in Second Life, why it matters, why they should know about it, and kind of pique their curiosity through that. That brings us to 2010, A New Hope. We pretty much became the rebels in our department, in our larger department of IT, because by that point they had seen so many Second Life presentations from us that they too were maxed out on their ability to absorb the excitement of Second Life. And they started saying, well, why don't you guys move away from that? Why don't you guys do tech support or something like that? And I said, no, 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 you don't understand. In an IT institution, a lot of times the way your service is evaluated is by the number of people you serve or by the number of tickets you open and close on any given day. And we constantly fight this battle as pseudo-educators and pseudo-technologists where we have to tell them, well, our tickets don't close in a day because our tickets correspond to projects that are 3 to 6 months long. And that's a hard sell to our superiors who are paying our salaries because they're looking at one employee that's, closing, 60 tickets a day or something like that. I'm just pulling that number. And then they're looking at us and we're closing maybe one, if that. So it looks like we're getting coffee and playing a game all day long when you look at it from the outside. And that's a problem for our longevity. So as a team lead, my role was to kind of take what we do in Second Life and mainstream it in a way that could be sold to upper management. And we did that through the Field School project, which has a direct impact to a geography class, Geography 4190. It simulates a village in New Mexico, and some of you may have seen our presentations from the past years of Second Life birthday celebrations. That is definitely one of our crown jewel projects in Second Life, and that sim is still present and is still in use, and it's going to be used very soon for an honors course with a 25 to 30 student roster. So that was one of our important projects. We took care of the renovation of the campus. We brought it up to par. Of course, it had to be done again 3 years later in 2013. And then the workshops kicked off, and it really was a success with the undergrads. The teachers are happy, the students are happy, everyone walks away happy. The only other time that happens on our campus is during graduation where everybody's happy. So when they're happy, we're happy, life is good. And we also realized that we can't be insular because until 2010, we were pretty insular as an institution in Second Life. We had to network better. We had to network better within Second Life, and we had to network better with other virtual educators out there. And we made efforts in that by, following conferences and getting involved in the forums and participating in events such as this one. And also, I think we went to, correct me if I'm wrong, Alexis, we went to Virtual World's Best Practices Conference once or twice. So that was very rewarding as well. That brings us to 2011. 2011 was truly the year of the geography class and the village from New Mexico that we built the simulation for. And the class, I think, just really briefly, was a distance ed course, so the students really didn't come on campus except for 1 or 2 sessions where they were trained for how to use Second Life. These students had never used Second Life before, so we had to do a 2-hour training session to build up their skills, get them ready. A couple of them were gamers, so those were a no-brainer. They were very easy to deal with. But then there's always a variation in a group of people that you educate. It's never a level playing field, and that's why education is tough, because as an educator you have to deal with the fast learners and the slow learners and those guys and gals in between that are just doing average but are not noticed because they're not in any of the extremes. So we had to balance that and get everybody on the same level playing field, and it actually worked out okay. We had some synchronous lectures where the instructor would actually log in along with the students, and they would walk around the village or sit in a classroom that we called a hay bale classroom. So it was an outdoor classroom in the sim, and they would go through slides, have discussions over voice chat, and then there would be an assignment to do in the learning management system that followed. There were also asynchronous exercises that were crosses between going around and gathering more information in various parts of the village, or they were kind of like hunts for like treasure hunt, like additional activities that kind of get get the students excited about spending more time on the simulator and getting really immersed in the village. In 2012, and I do love the slide, as a part of our legitimizing our efforts in Second Life, I think I pushed us towards exploring everything else that's available, everything else that's within reach. And when I say within reach, I mean financially and technical skill-wise. So what we did was that not only did we build that village in Second Life, we also exported that to OpenSim. We got involved with Moses, which is the military's own OpenSim-based network. I have built some things for them, but we have not officially created a collaboration with them yet. We spoke about putting the OpenSim version of the village there, but they have other priorities right now, so we're waiting on that. We also built the same village in Unity 3D, which is a sophisticated game development environment, much like Second Life, but a little bit more robust because the authoring environment is completely localized, and it also has the ability to export out to a plugin that runs on anybody's browser. So that's wonderful that you can actually go to a URL and view a 3D environment without having to create an account and all those wonderful things that Second Life makes us do. It also has the ability to export out to mobile devices. So Unity, we learned a lot from Google Maps. Google Earth also were a viable alternative, except for the fact that it seems like Google was kind of sterile. It was very accurate because you bet those maps are right, and the layers we created on top of them looked okay, but it seemed like while getting extremely accurate, we kind of lost a little bit of the warmth we could add by authoring that environment. Finally, we also looked at Cloud Party briefly. I still have a house there. I actually was able to import in one of our meshes that we created for Unity right into that. So I know we could import that environment, but I don't think Cloud Party is quite there yet, but it is promising. And finally, Avaya Engage. We've had an account with them, but their business model is very complicated and very pricey. So for a class of 30 users for a semester, for a year, they asked for $14,000. And I said, forget about it. Because if I take that to my boss, then I'll be fired. And that brings us to 2013. And 2013 is kind of changing pace. It's interesting that sometimes success can be a liability. So because our field school project was all consuming, and because we did all those variations of it in different platforms in order to illustrate our versatility and our interest in research and comparative study, and because the class kept coming back semester after semester, what happens in management is that your upper management looks at you, and it seems like all that you're doing during that time is one professor and his 10 students. So they are once again in their head, the gears turn, and they're like, well, I'm paying X amount of money for 3 people, and all that they're doing is one professor and his one class of 10 students every other semester. No go. There's this weird formula that goes off in their head. So we had to diversify again and find other people, other instructors that we could impact. And how did we do that? The biggest project since 2012 was the virtual classroom simulation, and it's represented by our booth this year at Second Life 10th birthday. It was a fairly complicated project because the instructor that we teamed up with from curriculum and instruction, she had never designed anything like this before. She was a true educator. She had really good instinct in terms of classroom dynamics, and she really knew her material, but she did not. What happens a lot of times when you work with people who have not done rich media or any kind of interactive product design is that they come to you with a whole universe that you must create. It is incredibly large and thousands of outcomes, to all these pathways and insane decision trees and so on and so forth. And we did not limit her. We instead, this is embarrassing a little bit, but I'm proud of it too. We almost took like 3 months to walk her from an incredible universe that she was creating to something that could be summed up in 4 discrete scenarios with relatively linear pathways that branched a little bit but didn't go crazy like the original design did. And even through the design process, as she was bringing us documents the week after week, we met every week with her for an hour. And we let her be the content designer, and she learned a lot. After the process, she actually came back to us and said, "Oh my God, you guys have taught me how to organize my thoughts and, create a flow chart kind of environment and really get complex thoughts into an organized manner where I can control them." I said, "Exactly, that's what we do." So that was a really good feel, and she walked away quite happy. We ended up creating her, in terms of assets, we created her a classroom that replicated a primary school classroom, and that is just for comfort's sake. So that when she brings in her students, they are not in some wonderfully abstract environment that our wonderful artists in Second Life can create. They're in a familiar environment. So they're already reacting to Second Life. It is an unfamiliar environment. You don't want to throw them into yet another surprise. So we made the classroom fairly similar to what they're used to. We created 16 or 17 children avatars, and Leona is one of them. And I would like to thank the fact that while we have restrictions in Second Life, we have such wonderful content creators that they actually, Leona was, I think, 300 lindens, head to toe, everything included, including her AO. I need to really, I am that content creator and thank them for making these wonderful avatars available. So I actually spent weeks shopping in the marketplace trying to find, because there's not a lot of kids content in Second Life because of the whole age play madness that we went through. But there is viability for these kind of content in Second Life. This was, very useful for us because I have no way of creating avatars. I'm not very good at that. I'm good with buildings. And without the help of content creators, we couldn't have put together 15 students, and that was wonderful to have. And they're all unique and adorable. There's no two that are alike. Like I said, we created the 4 scenarios that actually are kind of ground rules explaining to the teacher what they need to be doing for the classroom. Like, it says you're doing a reading exercise and your students are supposed to stay on task. Please circulate around the room and make sure that you pay attention to this and this student or something like that, relatively generic. And then the students also get instructions saying, well, you have this tendency and you're going to get up from your desk and you're going to not want to sit back down and you're going to talk to so-and-so, or so-and-so is your friend, go and talk to her, etc. So some pointers in terms of how to misbehave. And when the scenario was running, the student that was selected to be the instructor would circulate the room. Everybody's on voice chat, by the way. Every student is. But we selected that there'd be 4 to 5 active students per scenario because you don't want 15 students trying to use voice chat at once. That's madness. That's not going to happen. So it was kind of interesting. The first one, they laughed the whole time. 15 minutes of laughing because it was so weird to be in Second Life talking through these little child avatars. So it's the mind and body rejecting the avatar. The new container, the mind rejects and says, this is not me, this is not mine. Well, think about the first time you signed into Second Life and you felt that weird foreignness, that sense of unfamiliarity with your avatar, that they were not you, so why were they representing you kind of feeling. And I think the students were going through that at the time. And as we went through the first scenario to the second, to the third, to the fourth, things got more and more serious, and not in a bad way. They got vested in their avatars. They started accepting their character traits that we handed out to them. And between the scenarios, the students got to discuss what they were doing inside the scenario, and there were some incredible discussions. The instructor couldn't be happier. So this project definitely was a success for us. Without spending too much time on that, I also would like to say that I had mentioned earlier that we were doing Second Life immersion workshops for the instructors and the students together. Those were our other way of widening our base and showing to our management that we are impacting more students. And we did that through these immersion classes where I do a 15-minute intro into Second Life because undergrads have like 2 minutes worth of attention span, maybe less. So that has to be some really entertaining 15 minutes, and I assure you, I'm jumping from one side of the room to the other and showing video clips and doing all sorts of clownery to get it going. So once I got their buy-in on that, we are in a computer classroom. So at that point, they sign into Second Life with their previously generated avatars. Like they're actually assigned to create them ahead of time. And I had noticed that a lot of them had actually explored it a little bit, although they were told not to. So we changed those directions as time went by because I noticed that forbidding them to explore was not a good idea. They actually wanted to explore. So we let them explore before class. And in the class, we covered the core, what I call the core skills in Second Life, which is what used to be the orientation island, which is no longer. We created these panels that are much like the panels in the old orientation island, covering the skills such as walking, flying, chatting, IMing, sitting, getting back up, doing searches, teleporting, so forth. So we actually do this walkway on our campus. We teleport them all to our campus, and we go through the walkway one panel at a time, much like the orientation island, but assisted. So there are several of us from staff, like 2 to 3 of us in staff, in the room where they can ask questions, and we can just go and answer their questions while they're exploring. When we finish those panels, we actually give them a group activity that pretty much boils down to find a place that's related to the class. I mean, the instructions are a little bit more specific during the class, of course, but we just ask them to find the specific environment and go visit it, take a snapshot, tell us its location, and write a little blurb about it as a group. And we got a lot of very fun set of pictures and reflections from that. And finally, after the class, they go back and write their reflections on the whole activity, Second Life activity, into the learning management system in the form of a forum assignment or something of that sort. With all of this said, that pretty much is a very high level and general summary of the kinds of things we did in Second Life. And I must admit that the closer we got to the students, the things got better. So you really want to be pretty close to your students. It's harder to communicate to students through an instructor because your version of the truth is being restaged in someone else's mind, and then they have to take that and transfer it one more time. So the message gets convoluted. It's a lot easier to directly interface with the students, and in that sense, in many cases, our instructor almost is one more student in the class when we do the Second Life session. So lesson learned is that any kind of project that you're going to do in Second Life, you want to have a little bit of organization thrown at it. Imagine that. So make a project plan. You know, if your work is going to take longer than a week, longer than a day, if you're going to work with more than one person, as in yourself and your multiple personalities, or your friends or your colleagues, you're going to want a plan. You're going to want to assign roles. You're going to really want to get things on paper or Google Drive, you pick. If you're going to do an educational project, you want to identify your educational objectives and then map activities to these objectives through which your goals will be achieved, and then have some activity at the end where you can assess if you actually accomplish these educational goals or not. So you should give your students a chance to reflect back in a way that you can actually assess if they got anything out of this activity. And if not, then that's when you triangulate and change your activity to where it ought to be. You start trying new things. Never disregard your audience. So you're going to have gamers in the mix. Some students are going to be very super comfortable with an environment like Second Life, and you're going to have also your students who are not as coordinated. They don't like a computer game. They're more the reader type. They don't really care for a virtual reality. And then there'll always be one student in every class of 20 that is absolutely full of hate towards anything like Second Life. They're just the one that comes in and says, I hate it all, I hate the universe, and Second Life is an extension of it. You need to be able to deal with all sorts, and you need to be able to appeal to all sorts. And at all times, it's very important to keep the communication and the class, and not just the 2 hours that you're in, but the whole experience that you're staging in Second Life elevated. You want to keep it elevated and positive. So if your student's being negative, try to spin it around. Because most of the time that student's being negative because it's boring them. They can do more. So give them a chance to do that. And if you're teaching a critical material, so if this is not an optional activity, if it's not a nice to have, if it's not something that is non-essential, although most learning is essential, you have to, if it's critical pathway learning, you have to create some other alternative, because there will be always one student who doesn't have the right piece of hardware, unless you're in a lab that we do, like we do. If you have your students off-site in their own dorm room or computer lab, there'll always be one student that finds the one computer lab where Second Life isn't installed. There'll always be one student that's trying to run Second Life from their iPad, and so on and so forth. So you have to have that knowledge that you have in Second Life somewhere else, so that when that student hits that roadblock, you can say to them, well, maybe not this time for you, but you can go here to learn the same material, and then we'll discuss it in class to make sure you got it. And finally, capture. You put all this hard work into your project. You want to capture what you're doing. So you want feedback from your students. You want your students to create assets that you can hang on to and analyze, etc. So don't be shy about capturing something. And that brings us to our next slide. Further lessons learned. Get students to write about their Second Life experience. Students don't want to write anymore, except when it's a tweet. And that's only 140 characters, not enough. And if you actually put students in front of Second Life, and during that same time slot, you give them the option to explore and the option to write, they will explore and no one will write. Believe me, I've gone through that a zillion times. You almost have to say, now is the time to shut down Second Life, hang on to a snapshot, now paste that snapshot into Word, and write your description. Otherwise, you won't get anything. So you have to be in charge. I always say, parent, child, who is in charge? I am in charge. So you have to do that to yourself and make sure you are the gentle dictator of learning. Do surveys. Get your students to respond to 3 or 4 questions. I'm not talking long answer, but really quick multiple choice things that they can select even on the way out of their classroom. In the latest iteration of the survey, I even made a QR code that's a part of the last slide that they can scan with their phones and fill out on the way to their next class. So that's a nice way of using technology, where if the student says, oh, I don't have time for your survey, I have to go, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, you have to go, I understand. Just scan this, and then you can fill it out later. So we're trying creative things, and we're trying to get their attention with the kinds of technologies that they're attracted to. Now, with all this capturing that I've mentioned and student information, and it kind of gets a little scary. So let's talk about the gotchas that you can run into. Beware of equal access requirements. You have to have alternatives for your critical content, because you have to give access to everyone that you're teaching access to the material. So you can't just say, well, if you don't have a fancy computer, too bad, you won't be able to learn this unit. Haha. Or if your class is going to be entirely based in Second Life and that technology is pivotal, you have to put that into the course requirements explicitly so that they know that they're going to have this piece of hardware and that can run this kind of software. Accessibility concerns. Second Life is not very accessible. There is a lot of good people, such as the Virtual Ability group, that are trying to approximate and make Second Life a richer environment, but always keep in mind that someone may not be able to use Second Life in the way you intended. Be creative, create alternatives, different pathways, think about your audience. Get permission from your students. If you're going to take pictures of your students to use later, maybe in a PowerPoint, something like that, you have to get their permission. You have to get a waiver from them. Otherwise, you are not allowed to use that for student privacy reasons. And finally, count on Second Life, or I should say Linden Lab, doing a mandatory update in the middle of your class. This has happened to me more than once. So roll with the punches. I have no mitigation strategy for that. I use a computer lab that's administered by someone else, and I actually end up having to run to the next room and say, Jan, they're updating the software again. We're going to have to update the whole lab in the middle of the class. And sometimes, if you don't quit out of Second Life, you can keep running until the end of the class, even after they do that. But inevitably, there's always someone that crashes midway through the class, and then they have to restart, and guess what? We can't log them back in. Lots of fun. That brings us to pretty much the end. I have more slides. You can see 31 behind me, but don't you worry, we're not going to cover 31 slides. The rest of the slides are actually pictures of our campus through the years, and a couple of links to the projects that we worked on. In fact, I will go ahead and paginate through them, and then we'll come back to the discussion topics. Probably not even going to load this quickly, actually. So we might just leave that. I mean, some of you have already seen our campus. If not, you can download the presentation. I just didn't want to deprive you of different snapshots of the projects just because we had this movie poster theme going on, which we thought was very witty, but I was fearing that there was always going to be somebody that says, "What? We didn't come here to see movie posters." So, anyways, you can look at that by accessing the SlideShare version. And let's go back to our discussion topics and open it up. Is it up? Okay. Yeah, for me it's not rezzing. Okay. So we can pick any one from here. I'm actually going to open it to the audience. Just feel free to type in a question that you might have. Or we can take a few minutes while you peruse through the rest of the slides on the other one. And I see a lot of people clicking the slide share. Let's take a couple of minutes break then. The board I have keeps going back and forth, actually. I just lost the questions again. So for you, Alexis, is it questions? Okay. If you are actually looking at the slides for the campus, you'll notice that the main idea has kind of stayed the same over the years. What has happened is that we went from a lot of prims to some sculpts to huge prims to away from huge prims to native larger prims, etc. So we kind of went back and forth a little bit. And of course, the latest addition was mesh. I replaced a lot of things with mesh on campus. However, I'll add you this, that our campus was very primmy before. Everything was prim-based. But we were not notorious, we were actually famous in a good way. So we were famous for having a very low lag sim as our main campus. And ever since I did the transition to mesh, that's not the case anymore. I mean, it's not lag, but it's not network lag. It's viewer lag. The viewer software is struggling with dealing with so many mesh items in view. So I don't know about the mesh thing. I'm hoping that between hardware improvements and perhaps software improvements, the performance will get better. My Mac Pro, which has served me quite well in the last couple of years, actually crashes every few minutes at this point. So I'm actually having to do this presentation through a PC because of that. In the meantime, the board behind me has completely lost control. It keeps changing slide numbers like crazy. So I'll just go ahead and throw out some questions, and then we'll just go with that and wait for the board to settle down. Is there anyone here that's currently using Second Life for Education or has used Second Life for Education? Great. You excited about getting a new island? Because the first time it's pretty scary. The whole blank canvas effect of getting a whole island can be kind of scary. So what are you guys doing with your new island? Oh, another bobcat. Great. Someone who was that was saying that to us? Was that you? Did we speak to you? No, we didn't speak to you. Someone was saying, "How many bobcats are there in Texas? There's so many of them." Okay, so you did terraforming and then some online classes with scenarios. Oh, great. I think that must have been a long time ago. I don't remember a time when they were paying to do classes. 2006. Yeah, we were not. We were too busy building a pretty campus there at that time. Yeah, people prefer skyboxes. It kind of gives you that isolation um, from the surroundings and also privacy. Alexis asks what type of scenarios for what class? Okay. Ah, graduate nursing and education. Okay, great. We spoke to our nursing school as well, but there was one nurse practitioner that was interested in doing something with Second Life. The other ones were pretty vested in the new lab with the mannequins. They didn't want to use Second Life, but the educator that we spoke to, she wanted to do the experience of taking nurses out of first world hospitals and medical clinics to possibly second and third world countries where they might have a less than perfect area to practice, their profession and kind of the impact of what that would feel like. That's what she was interested in. With another university, and their mind escapes me right now. I apologize. They actually have a full-fledged lab in the sky, much like the ones you described, skyboxes, and they have modeled different environments for social work. So their students actually pair up into groups of two, and they go into these rooms, and one of them plays the patient, the other one the counselor, and they have an environment for a jail cell or you know, a domestic intervention kind of messy home, or school, a couple of environments like that, or a work environment. I think a office, like a work office for a corporate environment, and they practice, counseling each other. This is true. I think there are actually the one big one that comes to mind is um, Builder's Brewery. I don't know why I had a little mental block there. They do a lot of classes still. Yes, there was a lot more activity in Second Life earlier on about sharing the knowledge. Very true. You are? Please tell us about them. Oh, okay, great. Mhm. And there are a lot of actually institutions. It's just that I think those of us that actually are doing good in Second Life don't seem to be very visible. We kind of stay under the radar and do our own thing, but I think we need to get out there and share more and publicize more what we're getting done. I mean, we've certainly been loud enough. I think people have heard about us enough. But I wish we would see some of the other universities and institutions that have stayed behind and done some good work in Second Life after the whole 2008 era. Oh, Nikira's class is only in Second Life, so it is purely held in Second Life. Those are wonderful. I have a coworker that did her PhD on two classes, studying two classes like that for undergrads that were held entirely in Second Life. Hmm. So we're in good company. Great. Well, let's since there's so many of us, we should definitely ask the question of what can Second Life community or Linden Lab do to get educators back, or what can Linden Lab do to encourage educators in Second Life? Any thoughts on that matter? Oh, thank you. I agree. I know there are good people doing some really good things in Second Life. And if you haven't participated in that online conference, I think it's happening in July. Virtual Worlds Education Best Practices Conference. It is a mouthful. I'm getting it wrong, but look it up. Virtual Worlds Best Practices in Education or something like that. And that is a good place to meet other educators. Yes, you got it. And the last one I attended, I actually got more out of the sessions were good, but I got more out of just talking to attendees after the sessions, in between the sessions. So I highly recommend that. And I would attend it this year if I wasn't going to be away from computers for a month in July. No, they're not putting me away. I'm taking a vacation for once. What about what we completely skipped out on talking? I mean, we are nearing the end of our time slot, so I don't know if there's another presentation after us. But what we didn't discuss, and I forgot to mention, was that one of the biggest frustrations people experienced back in pre-2008 era was that we could only chat using text, and a lot of educators wanted to have that voice feature, and the addition of voice was definitely a good thing. And also the addition of the web pages was a value add as well. So what else is there that they can add that would help educators? I keep thinking, pie in the sky. I wish there was some sort of a learning management system, even if it was very simple. you're hearing doors slamming, our department admins are locking the doors in our department. We're going to be presenting all night long. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Any thoughts? Or shall we wrap it up? Okay. Alright, it's time to escape, huh? Alright, well, thank you for your time, and let us clean up here. Did everyone get the URL for the presentation? Let me paste that one more time if I can here. Or you can just IM me later if you don't have the URL. Alright, let me clean up here really quickly. Hey. Thank you all for your time. And happy birthday, Second Life.
Can you guys hear me? Jox, can you hear me? That's great. So we're going to set up over here in the little theater. Anyone staying for Jox's presentation, please do come on in. But I'll wander over this way.